But yeah, no, obviously social media is like just an interesting thing. And there is a lot of, there's been a lot of hoopla for a while about TikTok, right? I remember when I first heard about the TikTok ban and I was like, what does that mean? And probabilistically, this just seems far-fetched. Like this isn't going to happen. And obviously with the bill being signed, I did a dive into multiple just recantations of it, like what actually is entailed. And obviously, like, again, to my point, I don't think that TikTok will be banned. I think that their parent company, Byte, whatever the name of the company is, will eventually sell, because it doesn't make any sense to go, okay, well, you're going to lose hundreds of millions of users, or you can go, you know what, let's take our cash and go to something else. But it lends itself to an interesting time before, or to discuss an interesting time before social media, before we had such a profuse amount of information, good and bad information, at our fingertips. And the idea of one of those vanishing tomorrow, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, is an interesting concept. It's interesting in general. It's also interesting as it pertains to us in the fitness space and how we procure a lot of our engagement and clients and whatnot. So I figured we could kind of riff off back and forth about this and maybe give some insight to our thought processes around it.
Yeah. So there are a good amount of things that I'm not sure of the details on regarding the TikTok situation. And I do want to also maybe reframe this, because everything is being clouded, I think, by language surrounding ban, like the word ban. So it's actually not a ban. And I think that that's what's really important for people to understand. So what the bill does is it basically forces ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok. ByteDance is a Chinese company, so that's very important to understand for everyone. They are in China. They are within a country that is run by a nationalistic, totalitarian, communist party. Like, that's very important for everyone to understand. ByteDance reports to the CCP, no matter what they say publicly to Congress, on TikTok, like no matter what their CEO says. If you're a Chinese company, you answer to the CCP. You do whatever they tell you to do. Otherwise, you disappear. Like, look at what Jack Ma. So if anybody doesn't know, Jack Ma is the founder of Alibaba, which is another Chinese company. He spoke up one time about the CCP and against them, and he's basically been exiled ever since. Like, for a while, people were like, did they literally just assassinate this billionaire? I'm pretty sure it's been proven he's still alive. Like, I can't remember what the end result of that was, but essentially, like, if you're Chinese, if you're in China, you do not speak against the CCP. It does not happen. And so what this bill is doing is it's forcing ByteDance, again, a Chinese company, to divest the American arm of TikTok. That's not banning TikTok. So what can happen is they can spin out an American subsidiary that is going to be subjected to American oversight and US oversight, right? So currently, TikTok is not subjected to American regulation, rules, and oversight, which is why it is so problematic, right? So if you have an algorithm that is potentially pushing malicious things towards your populace, it's an issue, right? It's a big issue. And the Chinese are very notorious for doing that. The same with Russians, and before Russians, Soviets, like they were very, very notorious and well known for doing these types of things. They're very good at it as well. But outside of spinning out an American subsidiary, they can also sell TikTok in the US to an American company that is subject to American oversight and regulation. So these are very important things. It doesn't mean that TikTok is going to disappear tomorrow, right? I think that's what the word ban, in my mind, alludes to, is that TikTok is no more. That's not the case. ByteDance has a few choices here, and their actions in the next year are going to, in my mind, prove very clearly one way or another. If they choose to allow TikTok to be banned and they just they just let it happen and they walk away from the American the American market, then in my mind, that's pretty clear indication that they were doing what they've been accused of doing, right?
Mm.
If they end up selling, they're going to walk away with tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in their pockets. They're not literally getting TikTok taken from them. They're just being forced to sell for billions of dollars or migrate to something that has more oversight. So everyone is very up in arms about this, but the reality of the situation is if they sell, you still use TikTok. It's the same exact thing. No end users experience a difference. If they don't sell TikTok or if they don't divest TikTok, then TikTok is no more in the US, which is problematic for a lot of people, but they're tacitly admitting that they were using TikTok as spyware.
Right.
So like, it's not, so this is one of the few cases where I'm like very strongly in favor of like the US government. I think that this is the right decision, to be honest. Like, I'm not very pro-government in general, but I think that this is one of the situations where it's like, it's dicey and it's a decision that it's going to open regulators and politicians that are making these decisions. It's going to open them up to a lot of criticism. So like in that capacity, I do commend them for making a very difficult choice because yeah, this is hard to do. But I do think it's the right decision. Like, China doesn't allow American tech companies into China. So that's another issue, right? If free trade and free enterprise was mutual here, there was like a reciprocal aspect of business that China was tolerating American business in their country. And then we said, oh, no, fuck TikTok. That would be one thing. Every American company is banned in China. They don't have Facebook. They don't have Google. They don't have YouTube. They don't have Uber. They don't have WhatsApp. They don't have Telegram. They don't have anything there because China says, no, you can't have it. They don't want American companies in China. So that's the thing, right? Like, they've already banned all of our tech companies, all of our apps, all of our social media. So why, like, in my mind, why would we keep theirs here with no oversight? It doesn't make sense to me. And I know that was probably like a huge tangent that didn't really need to be like gone down, but I really do think it's important that people understand like the backstory of what is happening here and like also the geopolitical implications. Like China is our geopolitical enemy, like straight up. Like whether we're in like a hot war with them or proxy war, like we are kind of at odds with China in a lot of different ways. So yeah, I mean, you wouldn't let your fucking enemy walk in your back door and just like set up camp. So we have to protect ourselves, especially whenever it comes to something like TikTok that is pushing an algorithm on young people and kind of brainwashing people, or has like that potential to really be like throwing misinformation at very vulnerable people. So in my mind, all of this, it makes sense. I think that this is the right decision, long story short. But obviously, if ByteDance chooses to pack up their bags and take TikTok with them out of the US, I mean, yeah, it's going to have some pretty broad implications for like what that means for people that make a living on TikTok or have that as part of like their reach or their marketing or their advertising for their brand. Yeah, I mean, that'll be interesting. I don't know how that's even going to work.
Yeah, like I said, it seems super far-fetched, and thank you for clarifying. I know there are probably several listeners that have some idea that it's probably not just like a general ban. And obviously, I think there's the clickbait, and then there's also the idea when it's broadcast as a ban because it gets people to read it. But obviously, ban is worst case scenario. Like, it's set up so that ByteDance has roughly 9, but possibly 12 months to sell and figure this out, right? They have a full year to figure everything out. And then, even then, there are exceptions that are kind of built in if there are major efforts witnessed and in progress to actually achieve whatever parameters that have been set. So TikTok is not something that I think the U.S. readily wants to get rid of. They just, like you said, they want to be able to regulate it. They want to know that, hey, like, we can dictate what is and isn't on here, which is important. I think that as Americans, we can be very spoiled in the idea that like free speech. I can say whatever I want. Don't tell me what I can and can't say. And people will tell you like, okay, well, that's hate speech. You shouldn't say that. And people will go, hey, like, well, treading on this is a slippery slope. I don't want to. And we definitely have this level of entitlement because of what we're used to. And so when we hear the government is trying to take something from us, it's like, well, wait a second, hold on. Amendments. And it's like, to your point, it makes sense to be like, hey, listen, just like you as a parent want to know who's teaching your kids. If you run a government, if you run a country, you would like to know who is influencing, especially the youth, right? A very, very impressionable group of people. I don't know how many conversations I've had, and I have that internal eye roll every time I hear the response where someone shares some information that they have that might be relatively obtuse or abstract in nature, just like left field. And I'm like, where did you hear that? Or how do you know? Well, I read it on TikTok, or I saw it on TikTok. I'm like, what a generation to live in where it's like that is your initial primary source is TikTok. But something that powerful should be regulated. We should be able to say, hey, listen, like we can't just have anything and everything flying across this platform.
Yeah, and I think that that's an incredibly important point. Is we are in an era where most people learn through social media or through some kind of like online resources, right? I don't know how much shit I've learned from YouTube over the years, but it's quite a bit, right? So I can think to, some pretty clear instances where if YouTube's algorithm was really pushing me towards something that maybe I shouldn't have been looking into, or maybe it was pushing me deeper down a rabbit hole to make me a little bit more paranoid. I mean, if that's built into the way that the app functions and the way that the technology works, yeah, that's maybe not the best for a functional society to have a lot of people that learn misinformation, disinformation, or whatever from these social media apps. And again, like, I want to reiterate this because it's incredibly important. This is not a unilateral thing. China has banned all American companies and businesses from operating in China. And the ones that they allow to operate there, they are notorious for stealing IP. Notorious as fuck. Tesla was operating, so they have a Shanghai factory. They've had a Shanghai factory for years. It's also very challenging to even get into China as a manufacturer. So that was already an issue. They've already been dealing with a lot of stuff. Like they had to go through like the whole COVID lockdown. So Tesla's been fucked in a lot of ways by working in Shanghai, but it opens them up to a larger market, the Chinese market, right? And if you want to compete at a global level, you have to work with the Chinese market. It's just the reality of the situation. They have like 2 billion people. Well, Tesla just had one of like their pretty large proprietary manufacturing methods. Like, do you know what gigacasting is? So gigacasting is essentially a way of making larger scale frames and models a lot faster. So it's a very difficult process. But if we think essentially of being able to like cast an entire, an entire frame for the car, but it's a very difficult process. It requires like a lot of like cutting edge technology, a lot of things to work right, essentially material, all of it. Well, a company in China just came out. It's an EV company, an EV car company. They just released footage of like drone footage of their new plant that they had just opened, and it looks exactly like a carbon copy of a Tesla factory plant, whatever. And they have the same technology inside of this EV factory, and it's a Chinese company. Yeah, they could have gotten there on their own, probably after a while, or they probably could have just stole Tesla's IP, right? Like, right. They're notorious for doing that. And I'm not saying that like American companies don't do it, but like Soviets, Russians, they've always been notorious for also stealing people's IP. Like there are certain countries that have a well-known reputation for either going out of their way to steal people's property rights or steal their technology, or allowing them into their country to then steal their IP, right? China is a little bit more of the latter. So that's where some of this stuff is like very, very gray area blurry, where if things are not happening in a reciprocal manner in terms of business practices or oversight or regulation, then it would not make sense for one party to be extremely trusting and open-armed and inviting, while the other is super closed off and just essentially leeching off the other one, right? And I think that's really, to this point, what China has done. Like, again, China has an authoritarian government. They control the inflow and outflow of everything within China. They don't let their citizens experience Americanism, the West, really, right? Like, it's not as closed down as North Korea, obviously, but like they are very, very controlled and tight-lipped about everything that goes on in China. And that's for a reason. Like, that's purposeful. But Americans aren't like the West. We have tons of freedoms, tons of rights. We can do whatever the fuck we want to, especially as compared to China. And because of that, that gives China the upper hand on essentially coming in and like planting all of these seeds of misinformation and distrust and discord and chaos, and essentially just like stepping back out of the way. And like, if you have an app like TikTok that I think they serve 200 million people in the US or something like that.
The number was 170 million users.
Yeah. I mean, just so in 2020 or 2016? I mean, whatever, one of the last couple elections, there was all those huge issues about like Russian misinformation and disinformation campaigns that were being run through social media. And like, it was like Twitter and I think Facebook, and like all of these Russian bots were found, and all of like the Twitter files came out after Elon took it over, and they were talking about like how big of a problem like these things were and how they were trying to manipulate the elections. And if you can wrap your mind around that, and that those are American-run companies and U.S. oversight companies, like they're well within the purview of all of our regulatory bodies. If you can imagine all that stuff going on in that environment, like what do you think is going on with a company that's owned by China or a Chinese company, and then they answer to the Chinese Communist Party? Like,
right.
Again, it doesn't take like a genius to be able to put these pieces together. In my mind, what becomes really blurry is obviously whenever you have American citizens that are affected on like an economic and professional level by this decision, it makes things more dicey for sure, right? A lot of Americans probably didn't even know that TikTok was owned by a Chinese company. So it's not like they knew what they were getting themselves into whenever they set up a TikTok store and started making, like 10K a month from it. And they quit their job to run this TikTok store. Like, it's difficult as fuck. And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know, like, if there is some, I don't want to say compensation plan. There's probably not. Like, it's probably just like they get fucked if this actually goes through. But I mean, how many people make tons of money from YouTube? Like Mr. Beast.
Mm-hmm.
How many billions of dollars does Mr. Beast make from YouTube? If the US government pulled the plug on YouTube next week, that would be a really, really, really big fucking thing, right? And so I'm trying to, in my mind, relate it back to that. Like, obviously people's livelihoods are going to be impacted by a decision like this, outside of just, watching funny TikToks at 3 a.m. But I don't know. Do you have anything that you can personally point to say like that would be an extremely problematic thing to pop up beyond just, again, like the entertainment value?
Yeah. I mean, I think that on a broader scale, right? And then we'll come back to the individual who is actually making money on the internet via one of these platforms, TikTok specifically. This is how we get our information on broad. Like, no one watches the news anymore. No one sits in front of a TV. You don't see newspaper boxes anymore, right? We have the ability to go straight to the source. We also have the ability to be very misinformed by the other sources that are readily available. So social media presents a conundrum, but it is embedded into the way of life now, right? And I guess I'm interested more in the, I wouldn't even call it dystopian, but let's just use the word for lack of a better, if it's gone. Like social media, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, it's like, what do we do? Like, do we revert or do we just find a new way to fill that gap? And it is an interesting thing. We've talked about it as business owners. Like, okay, like what happens if the way we make ends meet, is gone tomorrow? Like, I'm a model on Instagram, and so Instagram doesn't exist anymore, right? And so that to me is a really interesting idea, and I kind of want to touch on what you think that looks like, because you're right. Like, it's, for instance, Instagram, I think is an older millennial thing. I think younger millennials and then Gen Zers, Gen Alphas are on TikTok. I view TikTok very much as commercials, right? Like commercials to get you into the store, to go visit a person's YouTube or go visit a person's Instagram and go into invest more there, right? TikTok, you can very passively just like fly down the street and see all the things and then decide which store you want to walk in. So how do you replace that? How do you, worst case scenario, ByteDance doesn't sell? Like, how do you replace that for people who have decided to start doing business on the internet and they use TikTok as a funnel, a major funnel, because your reach is so vast?
I mean, the easy answer to that is you just migrate to the next closest platform, which is probably Instagram at this point with Reels. But I'll be honest, like if ByteDance is willing to sell TikTok to an American company, it wouldn't surprise me to see like Meta or someone step in and purchase TikTok outright. Whether the U.S. government would actually allow that to go through or not is up in the air. I actually doubt that they would allow that to go through just because of antitrust stuff. They've been striking down pretty much every M&A attempt over the last few years that I've seen, and that would be like a pretty strong monopoly case for.
I was going to suggest another platform, like if like Elon went after TikTok or something like that to a company and tie into Twitter.
I would imagine
X, I guess.
Like I would imagine they would also strike that down. And the thing is, I would almost certainly, I would guess that Elon would not bail out TikTok just on like a political principle. Elon doesn't. I don't think he cares as much about the money as he does about like potentially fucking over a rival. Like I actually, in a way, I think Zuck is kind of like that as well. But I think Zuck would actually care about like pulling all those users over into like Meta's sphere. And I think he also cares a lot about their algorithm, because the TikTok algorithm is so much better than the Instagram and Facebook algorithm. And granted, they're made to optimize different things. So I think that's difficult. But for example, like the YouTube Shorts algorithm is trash.
Yeah.
Absolute fucking garbage.
It's just mayhem. If you're scrolling, things are just like from every different genre.
It is fucking horrible. Like, and it blows my mind how much better TikTok's algorithm is than YouTube, for example, because YouTube's owned by fucking Google. Right. Like, it's not like they're lacking money or lacking resources or engineers that are able to like put these things together. So in a lot of ways, I do think that the algorithm is what has made TikTok as entertaining and useful and like a black hole for all of these people's their digital time, right?
Yeah.
And myself included. I do not get on TikTok unless it's with my girlfriend at night before we go to bed, and we just like, kind of mindlessly scroll and laugh and, poke fun at people. But I definitely think that the quickest and most seamless recourse for people that are like TikTok creators would be to migrate to something like Reels, right? Because I know that you can download the videos from TikTok, and you should be able to like save them on your device, and then you can just re-upload them to IG or YouTube Shorts or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be the same. You have to rebuild your audience. And granted, a lot of the same people are going to be crossing those platforms. So like if someone has a TikTok account and follows someone, they probably also follow them on other platforms as well, especially if they are like a dedicated follower. But kind of going back to the YouTube thing, like there's a huge gap in monetization potential between these platforms. Like I don't know what TikTok's is, but I know YouTube's is insane.
Yeah.
Very good. Very like pro creator. Instagram has at times like tried to roll out just different features, different like ways of monetizing content. Maybe it's just because I don't have enough content and followers and engagement for me to notice, but like it's never been something I've really noticed. Like I know a few years ago, they were actually paying people out like a good amount of money
Mm-hmm.
to create content. And I think that fell off. Like, I don't really think they do it as much now, but TikTok is one thing. And I think that's important because it's still relatively new to where it is very exciting and people obviously like are very engaged with TikTok, but it's not the only social media platform. So people can and have the ability to migrate. Going back to your original question, like what happens if there's no social media whatsoever? I think that's where we have to like figure out what the dividing line between social media apps actually are. Because like, would you consider YouTube to be social media?
No, because I would consider YouTube more of a digital library where everyone can upload things.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is a social component to a regular library. You can walk in, you can meet people, you can meet the desk lady, the librarian, but you're not there to meet them, right? And that's not the main reason you're there. Where I feel like TikTok creators create content, but they also want you to buy into them as the person, right? They want you to be loyal. Same thing with, Instagram. Facebook is the purest of social medias, right? Like you literally just go to Facebook to make friends and keep tabs on your friends. Whereas I feel like YouTube, you see less attachments to people and you get attached to channels because of the information they have, right? And if you get attached to an individual on YouTube, it's again because of their channel and the information they have, and you don't give a fuck what they do with their wife or their kids or their friends. Like, you don't care. You're like, dude, I'm here for what you can teach me or what information you're here to disseminate, or even if you're entertaining me, what you are entertaining me with. Like, you are a producer, a movie maker, or so on and so forth. So no, I would not consider YouTube social media, but I think that might be one of the only places where I'm like, yeah, I think that's different than the others.
Yeah. So I think it's challenging, right? Because I would consider YouTube to be more of like a content hub, like what you said, kind of like a digital library. But I mean, it's very easy to see how it could be used as social media, right? Mm-hmm. YouTube Shorts are very much social media, and the comments are very much conversational at times. So it definitely does have that that aspect of it. Like things like Discord, right? Like, is Discord social media or is it a messaging app, right? There are a lot of blurred lines, but I think the main point that I'm getting at is, if Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter all disappeared tomorrow, or Snapchat, whatever, I think that people are creative enough to find a new local hub to then migrate to.
Yep.
And whenever you have any kind of like budding spark of engagement and community, then that inevitably will kick it off and more people will join. So I truly think that even if social media were banned tomorrow, that people would figure out a way of like coalescing again.
Yeah.
And we have the technology, right? Like, mm-hmm. We have messaging apps, we have digital libraries like YouTube, we have content hubs, we have pretty much everything. And because the line of social media is so blurred, I think that the genie is out of the bottle, and really, like, it's not hard to imagine how all of these things can very easily be reconnected to essentially replace what Instagram operates as, or TikTok operates as, or Facebook,
Yeah.
But it's more of in my mind, like the direct marketing, advertising, and monetization that people currently have from social media that makes it potentially more interesting of a question.
Yeah.
For if Armageddon happened and all of these apps and platforms were wiped out, and if everyone had to start fresh again.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. An add-on, there are probably more users on YouTube who don't have pictures or names associated with their quote-unquote account than I'd say other platforms, right? Like, you see so many users, 69x, whatever, right? Says, whatever. So many spam and unattended accounts on YouTube because I don't think it's not account focused. I mean, you go into YouTube, it doesn't say, hey, sign up, set up a picture, do this, do that, tell us about you. It's very much about what you can go and see as opposed to who you are. But like you said, it would become more of that, right? In the absence of the others, people would find a way to, like you said, coalesce and probably make that the new place that we convene. I did want to pivot and touch on I mentioned earlier the information available in all these different places, and the pros and cons of it, I think, are pretty apparent. I think most people understand that with this ready access to immediate information from a lot of times direct sources, it's super cool, and it puts a certain kind of power in the hands of its users that before our generation was not experienced. Our parents, they were still, spoon to mouth from the government, from Fox News or NBC or whatever, that's what they had to believe, because they couldn't go and fact check, or they couldn't talk to or follow that representative and see their tweet directly, or hear, their kids talk about whatever's going on. But then there's also a lot of convolution, right? There's a lot of misinformation. And for us, it's why we're in business, right? That's actually like why we're like the misinformation out there, the fact that there are so many people who are just lost in the sauce when it comes down to fitness and health. They hire us, or they come to us and ask questions and stuff like that. So maybe it's a good thing. And also, like, I just want to know your thoughts on social media's moral balance, its beneficial balance, as it comes down to like how users experience it and what the ROI is. Obviously, it sucks a ton of your attention. We've seen studies that present negative ramifications for spending so much time on social media. And also, again, it's this information hub. Like, you can go and find anything and learn anything. Like you said, learn so much on YouTube. You can access and you can follow the right kind of people and get a lot of information. And then you can also follow the wrong kind of people and be dumb as shit. So I'm just curious about your thoughts on that as a whole.
Well, I think social media, and I might actually be unique in saying this, I think that social media has been a net positive. And it's not because of cat videos or thirst trappy type of shit. Like, it's none of that stuff. I think the idea of like democratizing information in content creation, but also consumption, and people being able to choose who they want to follow and who they want to consume that content and information, I think that is a good thing, right? Like what you said previously, you had CNN, you had Fox News, you had NBC, you had New York Times, you had Washington Post. Outside of that, like, it was very like spoon to mouth, right? You had very limited options. And by the time it got to you, it had been filtered and distilled and many times altered. So the truth was what you were having to trust that these people were telling you, or these platforms were telling you. You had to believe that it wasn't being altered too much, and you were still getting the gist of what actually happened, or the truth, right? But we know now, like, I mean, just read one New York Times article and you're like, wow, this is pretty fucking bullshitty. Like, right. This is really stretching the limits of the truth. So I can see where if you only had a few options, that it becomes incredibly challenging to remain unbiased and also get an accurate representation of what the truth is. And also, too, whenever you have limited options, it creates polarization naturally, too. So that's where you end with a CNN versus a Fox News, because inevitably what happens is each side has to out extreme the other side, very much like Republicans and Democrats in general, because they just fracture the populace and pull people with semi-opposing views all the way to the end of the spectrum and turn them against each other. But like we've seen that with social media, that's what creates engagement. Right. It's not middle road opinions, it's extremes. And the people that are loud, and people that are offensive, people that piss you off, or people that have opinions that are kind of out there that maybe you want to say, but you can't say, like those types of things. But I think that actually the way that Twitter, X, whatever, but their now newest current model of content moderation with community notes is, I think, almost perfect. So I don't know if you've ever looked into like how community notes operates and actually works. So they have a pretty detailed algorithm. It's actually open source. So you can like look into it and see like how the community notes process works. But to become someone who is like an official community noter, like it's not easy. You can't just apply. Like you have to be someone who is essentially like validated to even have your opinion become a part of like the community notes pool, essentially, right? So it is incredibly, it's democratic. It works very well, and it does a good job of actually bubbling the most consensus viewpoints to the top, right? So if you see someone that's like spouting pretty obvious bullshit, the community note will be like instant, and it'll pretty much align with what the majority of people think on that topic, and it immediately will fact check those people. But also there's a solid checks and balance system on community notes. So that's, I think, what content moderation should be. It shouldn't be these people behind the scenes, behind some like closed algorithm or meeting in some shady room, just discussing the people that they don't like and who that they should limit their reach or who should be suspended or banned from the platform, because that's how Twitter used to operate. And that's obviously not what we want, right? We don't want things coming down from like political parties or FBI or organizations like that telling people who they're allowed to listen to versus who they're not allowed to listen to and silencing dissenting opinions. We don't want that, right?
Right.
So I think that the way that X, Twitter, whatever, currently operates, their process is closer to being correct in my mind than other platforms are. I don't think it's perfect, to be honest. I don't think it's perfect by any means, but I think that if you have an algorithm that over time slowly diminishes the reach of people that consistently get community noted, that's probably a good thing, right? Like if you're consistently being outed as like fraudulent and just spewing bullshit, your reach should probably be lessened over time.
Right.
If you're someone who's just scrolling Twitter and you see a post that you kind of agree with, or maybe it's a topic or a concept that you don't fully understand. So the first thing that you see is you're like, you know what, this makes sense. I fully understand this. But you scroll a little bit further and you see that it's community noted, and you read the comments and all the people in the comments are like, actually, this is bullshit. Well, there is an innate system of checks and balances operating on that platform, which I do think is good, right? I don't think that we should silence people for opinions that are bullshit, but we should definitely berate them and mock them and shame them, right? In some way, whether that's like, outwardly or whether it's just appending a community note to their post saying that this post is bullshit and this person isn't to be trusted. But I think the ability for anyone to put their opinion out there, be a creator, be an educator, talk about things, correct experts' opinions on things as well. I think that that's almost universally the way that we should be moving, even if it does come with certain levels of misinformation, rule breaking, feelings being hurt, stuff like that. Having these platforms truly be like the town square, quote unquote, right? I think that's what we should be aiming for. I don't think that pushing everyone towards echo chambers, especially echo chambers that are strengthening extremist opinions, I don't think that that's a good thing. But that is, in a lot of ways, what algorithms will promote and push people towards. So, just having something that is there to be able to like put the thumb on the other side of the scale is good. And I think, really, to be honest, that's what community notes is a good use for.
Yeah, I'll have to look into it. I'm curious if it's public knowledge who the people in the community note pool are. Like if you can go and see like, hey, I've been verified and whatever.
Yeah.
So like, I think that's important because mostly it's just a transparency, right? I think that's like, for me, that's why Reddit loses out. It's because like, okay, I actually like the fact that everyone can go in and say, this is bullshit, this is good. And anyone can do it. No one's banned from doing that. And I think that typically non-fact oriented things, because people can be misinformed, but opinions, thought processes, like the masses generally gravitate towards probably the closest truth, right? So I like being able to have that like even platform. Anyone can say yes, anyone can say no, and then we will push the things that people are saying yes to.
Yeah.
So that is interesting, and I do like that. I think that's probably the biggest problem people have with the Instagram algorithm, right? Is you don't know like Am I shadow banned? Is this going on here? Like what's happening here? What did I do? Like what did I say that didn't meet your community guidelines? Why is this person, and it's interesting. And then you have this, like, it's just always sus, right? We're always asking questions around, right? So why this person? Like what's going on here, right? What's your actual agenda? And if we knew, we could be like, all right, sweet. Like, hey, like I want everyone to pay for your membership and everyone has to pay for your ads if you want reach. It's like, all right, well, like at least we know, right? Or it's like, hey, no, I'm sorry, you're two shades this way, or you talk about these people this way, and we don't want that. So find another platform, right? It's like, at least you know. But that is super interesting. And I'd agree that in essence, what social media has done for people like you and I, and people I think in our generation, again, we talked about it before, we come from a group of people who were brand new to computers. Like our parents were still doing this, right? And we had computer classes and typing classes, and we got familiar with the internet. We had to cite internet sources. We know what Ask Jeeves is, right? Like we, we went, way, way back, and we couldn't use Wikipedia. And now I feel like Instagram, other social media platforms have encouraged us to embolden what we were always taught in action, and also by our teachers, which is just to question everything. Make sure that you have multiple sources supporting your ideas or whatever facts you're going to get. And the contrasting information that you see, it reestablishes that. You're like, yeah, of course, people disagree and there are different ideas, and I shouldn't just run with one, right? Whereas I do think there are a group of people who are negatively affected by social media who still are used to just being able to go to one place, Google one thing. And so they find one thought process or topic that seems to align with maybe where they kind of already had a predisposition, and then they run with it. And now even hearing controversial opinions, they still just shut it out. They're wrong. And like you said, the extremist gatherings begin. But I do agree that democratizing who can say what and what can go out there, no matter how asinine, is important, because you should be able to hear what everyone is saying. And typically the stupid people, they get weeded out. Like they might have like other stupid people hoarding around them, but quickly you go, oh, which is why transparency is important. Look at that person, look at that person, look at that person. They've all been flagged for these things. This is what they do. So like we can kind of write them off. Like we don't have to really pay that close attention to them. And I think that is important to be able to have that. I wish more people looked at it that way, as opposed to being this like sole source. I can go figure out anything, learn anything here. Like I think if I hear another person tell me, oh yeah, I learned it on TikTok, I'm like, did you Google it after? Did you look it up at all after, before you just said this is a fact and I'm going to go tell other people about it?
So what's interesting is I actually think that the opposite generation has a problem on Facebook. Or maybe not the opposite generation, but
what you're saying, yeah,
older generation.
Yes.
So if you ever go on Facebook, what you'll see is older people, they love their Facebook, but one person will share like some obviously way out there like article or interview or something like that, and then you'll see a bunch of like boomers jump in there in the comments like talking about it like, oh my god, I fucking knew the darkies have been up to it this entire time, right? Like they're just all in there. They love that shit. But you watch it like, this is like AI generated, like so obvious. And you see this all the time. I actually saw someone, I think it was on Twitter, they posted a thread from Facebook, and this account literally just posted the most obvious AI generated pictures ever, like every single day, just AI gen. And it was like pictures of food. It was like, made this pizza today. It was like this pizza that was the size of like a dinner table, and pepperonis that were like this fucking big, right? But it was stuff like that. And then you would see hundreds of comments from like old people in there, like, oh my God, pizza looks fucking great. Like just shit like that, And on one level, it's like kind of sad, because I'm like, they're probably just like lonely people wanting to interact on Facebook, and they're very gullible. And I think that's another thing too, where we're so used to technology that we can tell the difference between a picture generated by DALL-E versus a real picture.
Right.
People that don't they don't have like the filtering mechanism in their head to be able to even assume that something might be AI generated or fake. They see everything and assume it's real. Yeah. So they'll see a video with CGI and they're like, holy shit, I can't believe this is possible. I can't believe people have wings now. Like, and they just immediately believe it. And I think that's like where Facebook kind of is, right? Like you have a lot of people immediately jumping to maybe not conspiracy theories, but kind of conspiracy theories. But a lot of it too is like, you know, older generations, and they just don't understand to be skeptical of technology or things that they're hearing or seeing or reading through technology sources. And again, you know, I think that probably comes from, you know, growing up in an era where everything was distilled through a few platforms.
Yeah.
So you were seeing things either on the news or in the newspapers or in magazines, and it had already gone through like multiple levels of filtration and fact check. Well, maybe not fact checking, but like, you know, distillation and smoothing before it's actually printed. And there's a very clear track back to the original source if something is fucking wrong or messed up or whatever, right? So if the New York Times prints an article that is talking about something that's very clearly wrong, well, you know that the New York Times is responsible for it, right? So, but if it's some anonymous person on Facebook, then nothing happens, right? But that is where you start running into issues. But I'm very much someone who I think that I agree. The standards by which misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, inciting violence, whatever, those standards need to be like very clearly explained and publicly put forth so everyone understands like what the rules are that we're having to operate within on that platform. But then outside of that, you know, like I think it should be very easy to understand why if someone posts like a swastika on Twitter, that their account gets suspended, right? Like that's not a suppression of free speech. It's not. Like there are certain things that they have implicit meanings underlying them, and everyone understands it. We all get what those things are, right? And another one too, it's like the Intifada stuff, right? With Palestine and Israel, like they have meanings associated with them. So if you're posting these things or if you're saying these things, like don't be surprised if your account gets suppressed or suspended or banned. It's not restriction or suppression of your free speech. It's you fucking up and you pushing it too far. At least Westboro Baptist Church, like they know how to protest and be fucking assholes. They stay in their corner.
Right. They
still try to piss people off, but like if they walk into a classroom on a university campus, they're getting their asses fucking thrown in prison. They have this like 4x4 square that they're allowed to stand on in the oval at OSU. And if they move outside of that, they get fucking arrested, right? So yeah, if you want to exercise your free speech, there are ways that you exercise your free speech. If you move outside of that little bubble, then you suffer the consequences. And, you know, this is outside of social media, but we've talked about like protesting before. And I think the right to protest is a fundamental American right, 100%. But I know that we've also talked about like ways of clearly communicating your message, and being able to communicate that message in a way that demonstrably gets across like the seriousness of the message, while also not delegitimizing the message in the process. And that is a very fine line, and it's not always very easy to do, but it is possible. It's very possible to do that.
I would pause and say it's actually really easy to do, because in my mind, Revenge of the Nerds, right? Let's depoliticize this completely, right? And just like reference something. If a population who was really into video games and just like nerdy shit, sci-fi, so on and so forth, felt like they were underserved, slighted in any kind of way, and they're like, you know what? We all got in their fucking Discord channel, set up a convenient time for all of them to link up. And 1 million of them just show up to a city. And they don't do anything. They just show up and they're all in the same place at the same time. The world will watch. You can say whatever you want at that point in time. You don't have to march. You don't have to knock anything down. You don't need a megaphone. You don't. Just that kind of because we understand what kind of coordination that inherently has to take. So whatever you guys have to say has to be really important to you. And it could be simply something as like, we want more Dragon Ball Z on TV. But like whatever it happens to be, people are going to watch. And so I would say, I think that demonstrating a need for change by some sort of subgroup is actually mathematically really easy. Like if you can get the numbers, like to me, it's easy from there.
Yeah. And maybe I did like overly reduce the way that I was talking about that, but I was looking at, so I've never organized a protest on a mass scale, so I'm not exactly sure of like the logistics of these things, but I was reading something the other day that was talking about the protests that have been going on like in San Fran, I guess all around the country, but it was specifically in San Francisco, and the protests closed down the Golden Gate Bridge. So I don't know for how long it was, but they were protesting on the bridge, and they shut down the entire bridge. So
people are still standing on bridges. I'm not standing on a bridge.
Yeah, but well, I think it was like at the one side. So like there was like no through traffic that was able to go by, and it might have been for like an hour or so. I mean, it was quite a bit of time. So obviously like that really pissed people off. And I was looking into it more, and someone was talking about how there are very clear steps for legitimate organizing and legitimate protesting, and anyone who has done that at a large scale before and been the creator of any of these protests that have been done in a legitimate way, they actually go through proper channels to get permits for protesting in specific areas, right? And they communicate that with people in the city, with the police, so that the
stores, like they let everyone, yes.
Yeah. So like they can be in this area, they can demonstrate, they can protest, they can let their message be known, but all of it is very organized for their protection as well. And I think that that's something that's being missed here is if you lay down in front of a semi-truck on a highway, if they run over you, that is not them impeding on your right to demonstrate. That's you impeding on their right to do their fucking job or get where they want to go.
Yeah.
I think that it's a stretch to say, oh yeah, like it's kidnapping. Like I'm not going to go that far, but like, don't be surprised at the consequences of your actions whenever there's a very clear line going from action A to consequence B, right? If you lay down in the middle of the road, you get fucking run over. Like you should understand that is a potential there, right? But yeah, that was something I didn't even realize in terms of protesting and doing so at a large scale is that, there's legitimate channels for doing that stuff. And I mean, it seems so obvious to me, like in retrospect, I'm like, well, no shit, right? Like that would obviously happen. But I was looking into it a little bit more, and, I'm not sure how accurate this is because again, this is something I learned on social media, but it did seem to me from what I was reading that a lot of like the civil rights demonstrations and organizations were pre-organized and pre-communicated with the council of the city, with the people that were actually overseeing what was happening there and assisting essentially and making sure that it was a peaceful protest and allowing the protesters to communicate their message, do so without being impeded, but also making sure that everyone was safe throughout the entire thing. Again, I don't know if that's necessarily the full truth because I didn't do too much research beyond that, but that was interesting to me because the way that things are done now, and we're getting very off of the social media topic, but it's still kind of interesting in terms of like a conversation, but like the way that things are done now in terms of like exercising free speech or exercising the right to protest, it's really just a demonstration, right? Like it's demonstration in the purest sense of the word, like a spectacle.
Yeah.
It's, hey, look at me as I'm getting arrested, look at me as I'm breaking the law, and then look at me as I'm also screaming that my rights are being violated, right? It's like, no, if you like throw a swastika up on Twitter, you're going to get banned. If you are protesting in an unlawful way, if you're harassing people on their way to go to their classrooms, don't be shocked if you get fucking arrested. Like these things happen. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know like the full scope of all of this stuff and the practices, because obviously, you know, Westboro Baptist Church, they are still yelling at people on campuses. But my intuition says that as much as I hate them and everyone else hates them, I know that they're also a bunch of lawyers. Like Westboro Baptist Church, for anybody who doesn't know, like the entire congregation, is that even, I don't know if that's the right word to use for them. The entire church, whatever, all of them are fucking lawyers. And they're lawyers by design so that they can sue people who assault them, and then they take all their money, and then that's how they continue to fund all of their shitty operations, right? So my assumption here would be that Westboro Baptist Church, their demonstrators, they are going through proper channels.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that the universities or the city can do to stop them from protesting in this very, you know, small 4x4 square as we're walking to OSU games and getting like berated. But like, it's annoying, but they're also not like spitting on us. They're not like walking up and like preventing us from going anywhere. They're just being dickheads. And I think like everyone has the right to be a fucking dickhead. That's fine. Yeah. But again, it's just like, understand how to be a dickhead, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's, and it brings it kind of full circle where you talk about the transparency. And if Instagram was like, hey, listen, like this is what you can and can't do, can and can't say. And you're like, hey, I actually really feel really strongly about this and I'm thinking about doing this. Like a submission form or whatever, right? Because the Million Man March was a sanctioned march, right? They needed to, that's a mass scale, like communal gathering of people surrounding a very hot, sensitive time and discussion. So there were people that were prepared. There were police officers that lined the streets to make sure that these guys could walk through without us, you know, turning into something that was, you know, some sort of in mass scale disruption. So definitely agree with you in the way of like, hey, like you can be a dickhead. Like I said to a guy on the internet today, like you can have your opinion. You can't get mad if people tell you your opinion is stupid. But it's also like, you also can't go scream your opinion in someone's face. Like if you get this close to me, bro, I'm going to hit you. But if you're screaming it from across the street, I don't care. Like, but if you come this close to me, I feel threatened. Now I feel unsafe. Like I'm allowed to defend myself. But you're screaming it over there, dude. Like I can say something back. I cannot. It doesn't really matter. The internet's the same way. It's like, hey, like you can say whatever you want. I actually don't care what you say because I have the control or what I decide to digest. And to your point earlier, maybe I do have the control depending on how old I am, because I actually said to friends of ours that my favorite comment sections are Facebook comment sections. There's nothing like a Facebook comment section. If you want humor, Facebook comment sections are fantastic. Like whether it's the fake sex scene videos from actual movies that then someone like tags some sort of porno, or if it's the fake in-flight drama where someone starts fighting with the person sitting in front of them, but you see very blatantly that they're like in an office building because you see the white walls in the back, but people are like, oh my God, see, we need more security on planes. And I'm like, you have to be kidding me, right? But like you said, that generation is maybe not as in control of what they digest because they're so used to digesting in a certain way. I had a conversation with a friend of mine, as we get ready to wrap up, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, their mom, and she was like, yeah, you know, like I'm realizing that the government like doesn't always have our best interest at heart. And I just like sat there for a second, right? Because I'm like, it's like watching like a little brother or like a kid you coach have an epiphany. You're like, I don't want to make you feel like juvenile or stupid. And also, I can't even relate to this feeling because, and so it got to the point where she was like, Christopher, what's that look? And I'm just like, I'm not gonna lie, mama. I'm a black man. I've kind of always, I've kind of always known that this was, wasn't rigged for me. So I'm glad you're realizing that, like, in situations you're just as fucked as I am in certain situations. Like they're looking out for themselves and the people who line their pockets. And if you can take that same kind of thought process and at least just veil it with the way that you experience, and or I guess I should say veil it to a point that you see through that when trying to digest things, so that you're naturally suspicious or skeptical of what is being pushed on you, then you'll probably be better off, So I don't know.
I agree with you 100%. I think that everyone should practice healthy skepticism of everything that they see. I also think that there is a tipping point where skepticism turns into conspiratorial thinking, and you see conspiracies everywhere, and that's not healthy either. But, like taking it again full circle, I think that's what we have to be really careful with about having something like TikTok be owned by a foreign country that is openly hostile to the US, but also just to Western beliefs in general, and like the way that Western countries operate. Is it doesn't take a lot to tip a populace that is naturally skeptical of their government into full-on conspiratorial thinking and distrust and subvert the government, right?
Yeah.
So that's, I think, the issue with TikTok is like it potentially is a large-scale like subversion process going on, and that is honestly like not that hard to do because everyone kind of understands. I mean, maybe not everyone talking about like your story here, but like most of us understand that like, yeah, you probably shouldn't trust the government at face value or politicians in general or anyone in power that is status seeking or wealth seeking or power seeking. Like there are just people that you should probably assume that there is some kind of like underlying incentive or motivation going on there that's not necessarily transparent. Right. And I think that's good. Again, healthy skepticism, natural skepticism. But if it starts getting too far, and so it's getting pushed in the
trying to control us.
Yeah, and again, that's where you get these echo chambers of like in-group versus out-group, where everything in in-group, I believe. So if someone who I am friends with sends me an article that talks about how like, as all the frogs are getting turned gay. Have you seen that Alex Jones clip, bro? Oh my God. So yeah, that's actually a great example, right? So like you have people who are very like Alex Jonesy conspiratorial, where like they're very permissive to all information that comes in, so everything that comes in, they believe because it creates an excitement in life, like if every outlandish theory is true, then life is way more exciting. It's also way more dangerous and way more chaotic and anarchic than it needs to be, but like it's still exciting. But if everything was truly operational and surface level, then it's really fucking boring. And also like things don't operate as well. There's not a lot of explanations for why things happen. So like it's very confusing, but at least it's some semi-orderly. Right. So I think it's a natural place for most people to end up in between. But at the same time, you do have, again, this in-group versus out-group type of thinking where, you implicitly trust everyone who is in your in-group, and you, I guess, explicitly distrust everyone who's in the out-group. So any information that's coming outside of your circle is automatically like conspiracy, right? Like it's conspiracy, like everyone is against us, and everything that's inside of it is just automatically believed.
Right.
But again, that's where the echo chamber aspect of social media can become relatively problematic really quickly if it's not nipped early on, or if there's not some kind of like solid and resilient, robust content moderation policy in place, like a community notes. But just going back to what you said, I think that Instagram and every social media platform should have like a downvote button or dislike button.
Mm-hmm.
If Instagram isn't going to have some kind of like public content moderation, like community notes, they need to have some way of people actively voicing their displeasure in a post. Yeah. Especially since so many people use Instagram specifically for their business and for content and for even news. Like, there are very popular news accounts on Instagram that aren't even operating as like a single person. It's a business, it's a company. So if you're going to have all of that, like there needs to be some way of like publicly showing that something is bullshit or disliked or something without just taking it off. I think that's my big thing with Instagram specifically, is like if something gets flagged as disinformation or misinformation, it just gets deleted, right? Or the account gets suspended. And I don't think that that's the way that we should go. I don't think there's anything wrong with people having shitty opinions. But I think that there needs to be a way of like flagging that shitty opinion for everyone else to publicly see.
Well, there's not a strong enough review process for Instagram, right? Like
Yeah, it's
I
not.
mean, like I say, I've done it before where people, it depends on my mood, right? If someone comes on to one of our posts or onto one of our friends' posts, just spouting bullshit or saying like mean shit, occasionally I'll go, all right, whatever. I'll just banter back and forth. I've got time to be KD today. Or I'll just flag it as bullying and it gets deleted immediately. And that person, but like, I don't know what their process is. Do they go through that? Does someone like comb through that and go, oh, this actually was bad? Or actually the person who flagged this is actually bullying. They're the ones just, imposing and using the guidelines, community guidelines as a way of censoring, other users. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it's super interesting, but like you said, just transparency. Like, hey, like, what's actually being vetted for here? Who's crossing the line? Who has crossed the line? What does that look like? Is it like strikes on a driver's license? Can those be expunged over after a certain period of time? Do I have to completely, kill my Instagram and start all over from scratch because this one's, flagged forever? It is interesting because you think about someone like Zuck and you're like, being tight-lipped and making sure that you stay ahead of the game, I get it. You have market share, I get it. And also, I feel like Zuck's always been about the people. It feels like he's been like, there's a in a way that serves him. So,
Oh, he's a Machiavellian if I've ever seen one.
yeah, I definitely think there's always strategy there, right? He's always thinking about, okay, well, like, how can I scheme this? I do think the core of what he's scheming is about people and their access and what they can do and this and that. As long as he's the center of it, as long as he's the one who gets to drive it, he's like, I want you to have it, right?
Well, he was a dual computer sci and psychology major.
I didn't know he was a dual psychology major.
Yeah. So that's one of the big things that like he's interested in, and I'm a huge Zuck stan for anyone who's listening who doesn't know. But yeah, so like that's one thing that he's hugely interested in, which obviously plays largely into Facebook and Instagram, right? But no, I think it's interesting. Zuck is like one of those people where like I don't know if I've ever really been able to get a read on him fully. Obviously, I respect the fuck out of him as like a business owner and an entrepreneur and someone who has now been able to like take a public image that was like so beaten down and in the shitter and revamp it to be like this tech bro assassin. I don't even know what he is now, but like it's interesting to me how like the arc of Zuck and Elon have been so contrasting. Where Elon was like this demigod back in like 2019, 2020, where, even very progressive news outlets were like championing Elon. I mean, obviously he has Tesla and he has like very like EV friendly, or excuse me, not even EV, but like, like renewable friendly and environmental friendly companies. But Elon, obviously his public image has taken a turn for the worse with purchasing of Twitter and like some of the way that he conducts himself on there, which, for me, it's not as big of a deal for me personally, but like I understand where people could be very fed up with Elon's bullshit. And like, I also think that he just needs to chill the fuck out sometimes. But Zuck was like the enemy for a lot of people. Like he was the epitome of this tech oligarch that came into power and was suppressing people's opinions and like, impacting their livelihood. And he was taking bribes from the government to basically be like do the bidding of like Trump and stuff on the back end and like suppressing political opinions. And like, that was how everyone viewed Zuck as like this reptilian type of guy who was pulling the strings in the background. But now he's like revamped his image so strongly. And like, I love it, to be honest. It's funny too, because like where Instagram and Facebook are so notorious for having like their algorithms and the way that they moderate content behind lock and key, like Meta's AI Llama is open source. So that's another interesting thing to me. Like I understand where he's coming from and the business side of things. I think it's actually incredibly interesting where like him creating Llama as an open source model directly undermines OpenAI and all of these other, like even Google. which is so interesting to me. Like he's basically playing the long game and trying to fuck these other companies, which I love. But yeah, like just in terms of like image, it's so interesting to me how like these owners of social media platforms, now Elon, that he owns Twitter, have come in like very different directions.
Yeah, it's funny. And you think about psychology, you think about game theory, you think about war theory, and I mean, obviously, Zuck was a child, when he came in, right? Like, an actual like kid, and he's a meek looking individual. Like he looks like a nerd, and I think one of the, at least I know for me, a big turning point was seeing him speak more, like in videos, and like seeing him speak more makes me trust him more. Like makes me like him and want to get to meet him. I'm like, I want to hang out with you because I used to see you as this guy that I respected, super dope. Product is obviously awesome. It's cutting edge. You continue to try to get better. You're not just sitting around. And I think that I can always admire that. But I guess I saw you as like this like kid who was still trying to prove himself. Like everything that came out was the infamous stories of Zuck, like Zuck bullying people, the emails that you posted. I saw those last week or whatever. And I'm like, those are cool. But it was always stories of that. It was just Zuck is mean. Zuck is this. He's trying to put his foot down. I'm the guy. You got to come through me, and you can't do anything unless I tell you can. And I think he's taken the approach now, and it could be just because he's trying to change his image. It could be just being more aware or understanding that you actually get more done this way, where he's like, I'm not here to be demonstrative in any way. I'm not here to be a bully or tell you that something is stupid in any way. His video on the Vision Pro was fantastic.
It was so good, yeah.
There was not a point in there where he said, this is trash and you shouldn't buy it, right? It was so condescending, but condescending in a way that was like, I'm not even mad. Like, this is good. This is just really good marketing. And also it let you into what felt like a conversation with a guy that you're like, I'm not threatened by you. I'm not put off by you. Like, this is just a cool conversation, and the tonality that he took there, I think, was strategic. And I think that could maybe lend itself to, how his image has started to change. Because I do think that, like, meekness or portrayed meekness can play to your advantage as long as you understand that it's a Trojan horse, right? Like people thinking that they can take advantage of you, even subconsciously feeling like I'm not threatened by you, opens them up to your ideas and their willingness to listen to you, and then your ability to manipulate them and get things that you want. So, whereas Elon, obviously, like you said, demigod, boy wonder, but now he's kind of like this unopposed force kind of running rampant. People are like, well, wait a second, hold on, like hit the brakes really hard. We got to pull this guy down a notch type deal.
Well, I think Elon has very much of like that man-child streak in him where he can kind of act like a prepubescent boy who like hasn't gotten his way and he just kind of throws a temper tantrum. Which, I mean, in my mind, as long as you're doing your fucking job and as long as you're continuing to fulfill your duties, you're good, right? And I understand that he does have a public image that like he needs to do a better job of maintaining and not staining in a lot of ways. But again, like I'm not his fucking PR manager. I don't give a shit, right? If his companies that he owns are continuing to do well, then that really should be all that matters for most people. And also, as long as he's not like actively harming people, like, yeah, people don't like the way that he posts on Twitter X, and they don't like the fact that he voices opinions, especially political opinions, that are disagreeable with their own. But everyone has opinions. He just happens to own a social media platform.
Yeah.
So whenever he voices his opinions, 500,000 people see it immediately. So that's the thing, right? Like, Elon is just to the point now where he doesn't give a fuck. So he doesn't care enough to pull back on the things that he actually thinks and believes. He just says it or reposts it or comments on it. And again, like from the position of someone who like invest in Tesla and like invest in Elon's companies and like really wants Elon's companies to succeed, because I think if Elon succeeds, then everyone succeeds, to be honest, right? Like we should all be rooting for the guy. But as someone who is in that position of like actively rooting for Elon's success, I do find it sometimes annoying the fact that like he can act like a man-child and be very petulant. And also, this is something that like I never would have expected, but I think that Zuck is actually much more personable and easy to relate to than Elon is. Especially if you watch him in interviews, I'm like, Zuck seems more like a human than Elon does. So for all the memes of like Zuck being like an alien or like a robot and shit, I'm like he's obviously like revamped everything that he's done, and he's clearly put in a lot of work to like project this confidence and carry himself in a way that exudes much more like, hey, you can trust me type of vibes, you know?
Yeah.
But going back to like the Zuck thing and him being very demonstrative and kind of being a bully, this is a question I have for you, and I don't necessarily know if I know the answer, but I have a theory, right? Why do you think that that's a bad quality for Zuck, but it's seen as a good quality for Jobs?
So I don't think that it was necessarily a bad quality for Zuck. I think that there's a part of Zuck being young is kind of like, as much as either one of us could relate, in my opinion, being a woman in the workspace, like especially like in a high exec workspace where like a woman gets kind of deemed as like she's a bitch, like she's rude or she's this because she's demonstrative. And I think that it's a double-edged sword. I'm sure there's part of her compensating, knowing that she's a minority and that she might not garner as much respect as she's earned. But then there's also the aspect that like these guys are not necessarily used to taking orders from a woman, right? And so now you have this kid who's 22 years old saying like, this is what we're going to do. Actually, no, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to sell. We're not going to do that. Like, you can fuck off. And if you're an adult, if you're a hedge fund manager, if you are a person who's investing and you just gave this kid $500 million and he's like, nah, fuck that. We're not doing that. And you're 50 years old. You're like, I'm sorry, what? Like, and so I think it probably just encouraged like, hey, you're not going to talk to me like a kid. I also think that a point I was actually going to make, and then I'll come back to your question, was with social media in mind, I think this is probably both of our goals, to get so successful that your companies succeed in spite of the kind of person that you are or what you do in your activities, right? Like Tesla's not going to stop. It's bigger than Elon, just like Apple. At one point in time, like it needed Steve, but at another point in time, it's like, dude, Steve, you've created something that you could do whatever you wanted right now. Like you could do something bad. You start molesting people, right? And people would just like go, we're still gonna keep buying Apple, but like fuck this guy, right?
People still can go to Chick-fil-A even though they don't like the gays,
right? You know, it's gonna happen, right? So, I also think that, to get back to your question, Steve just maintained his character. He kept it. He never broke it, and he didn't work in a social setting. Like he could isolate himself. I think if you preach connectivity, if you preach bringing people together, like Zuck's whole thing is like meta. We're gonna be able to sit in our houses and talk to our friends who are in fucking China. You can't also be a dick. Like you want to be sociable because you are in a social setting.
So I agree with you, and I think that there are also another couple of things that I would add to that. I think the Social Network movie really damaged Zuck's reputation because that came out. I mean, when did that come out? Like over 10 years ago, yeah?
Yeah, I love that movie. It's such a good movie.
It's a great movie, but like think about how old Zuck was when that came out. I mean, was he in his late 20s when that came out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they pretty much showed him as a kid.
Yeah, and I mean, he was not shown in a great light in that movie. I mean, it was a great movie, and it is a great movie, but like, I wouldn't say that necessarily did a great job of like promoting Zuck's reputation in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that Jobs, this sounds fucked up, I think he died at the right time to be able to preserve his legacy in the best way. And I do think that the fact that he is now dead and has passed, I think that also does create this like myth around him.
Tupac allure, right? Like,
it kind of like it martyred him in a way, because he passed away whenever Apple was on top. They were, I don't know if they were peaking whenever he died, but I mean, they had conquered the world by that point.
Yeah.
And he also passed away before social media really started to take off. And social media was around, but it wasn't around like it is now. You know, it hadn't become this like ever-present aspect of everyone's life. Because I think
could also see Steve Jobs not using social media. I could see him like
Elon. I could see him like being a fucking dickhead to people on social media because he doesn't care, right? Like because Steve, he had the personality to care so much about what other people's opinions were, especially of like his company and the products. Like I could have totally seen him like just trolling on Twitter and just like talking shit to people. But at the same time, like I do think not even him being active on social media, more so like people being able to quickly share stories and share things about his personality, having people come out from Apple talking negatively about Steve, the same way that they've done about Elon and Zuck and Bill Gates and all these other CEOs and founders. But no, like just comparing those two, I think that they have different journeys there, but in a lot of ways, like their ruthlessness, their streaks of being kind of non-empathetic to those around them, the way that they took over a specific sector and like kind of created it, like obviously Jobs created the mobile phone sector, but he also kind of created like the personal computer sector as well. And then, you know, Zuck with social media, like there are a lot of parallels there. And I think now Zuck's reputation and image is coming more around to like where Jobs's image is in like a very positive, but kind of strained positive light, because people know how he was. And there are also like negative aspects around him. But no, I mean, obviously I like respect both of them heavily and look up to both of them heavily, but it is interesting to me.
To the martyrdom, I think that because the story is over, people get to look at the ends and decide if it justifies the means. And since most people go, hey, look, yeah, I didn't like him, but are you asking me, would this have been successful without him, or even without the way he was? And you have people who are like, yeah, like to this, when he died, we did not have a good relationship. And also Apple would not be what it was without the way he was. And he's like, I couldn't have, I don't know why am I blanking on his name? Yes, Woz. Woz flat out, he's like, hey, listen, yeah, I would not have run the Apple II project the way he did. And also it wouldn't have been successful if I had run it. Right? Like when you have someone who can like just say, yeah, flat out, bro, like he had to do it that way. And so people get to go, well, listen, like if they are justifying the means and they had to take the brunt of it, then who are we to be like, oh, no, he was a bully, you know, let's take his wins away like we did Joe Pa, you know, type deal, right? Like at the end of the day, it's like, hey, listen, your story's over, so we get to kind of look on things a little bit lighter. Where Zuck, like you said, he's still around and social media is heavy. And if he was just a dick, he wouldn't be able to have his means justified until after he died. Like he'd have to accomplish and be able to like, oh, see, look, I did what I did because, and now, yeah, there's now. People aren't watching, but I put my hands out.
Yeah, I have an interesting question for you. So like, have you ever heard of the great man theory of history?
Enlighten me. I might have, but like, yeah.
Essentially, the idea there is that history in progress is pushed forward by like quote unquote great men, like singular people who have changed the course of history through their actions and things that they did or didn't do in certain cases, right? But then on the other side of that, it's like you have the school of thought and the theories saying like, you know, no single person can influence history or things that much. It's always just a conglomeration of all of these like parallel effects and timelines coalescing into a single person having like the limelight on them. But, you know, in the background, there are so many moving parts that one person cannot have that much of an impact. I know what I personally think, but I'm curious as to like what you think.
I think I actually would agree with the I'd bias myself more that way. I wouldn't say I full-bloodedly agree that, hey, like, we're nothing without Elon, we're nothing without Zuck or George Washington or Martin Luther King or any figure in any space. I think that, keep it nerdy, multiverse, right? Whenever someone steps into a different version of their universe, it's pretty much the same with like small differences. Maybe there's a group in power that is like very close to a group that they know in their own version of history, their own timeline, but that group's favorite color is red and not blue, right? Yeah. And take that, extrapolate it. If Martin Luther King didn't exist, would civil rights have still been a thing? 100%. There were several hundred movers of that movement, and he had a voice, he had a talent, and he existed at the right time to kind of assume that, right? They talk about preparation, and luck is when preparation and time kind of line up. And I think that can be attributed to people like Zuck, like Elon. Would someone else have come along and done what they did to a degree? Sure. Would it be as great? Maybe, maybe not. Do I think that they needed to be the people to get to where we are today? Yes. I don't think that because there's an infinite amount of characteristics and genomes that can make up a person, and then experiences that can make up that person and how they think, that to replicate Elon perfectly, replicate Zuck perfectly, or Steve Jobs perfectly, is impossible for the most part, right? In all pragmatic senses of the word. That being said, if you're telling me that Steve Jobs was a way, and I'm like, yeah, would another person have been that way? Probably not. So we needed Steve to get to where we are today. And then you could chance like, okay, well, without Steve, where would we be? Maybe better, but also maybe worse. And is that a chance you're willing to take, or do you take on? No, it was his responsibility. It was on his shoulders to get us here. And he had a great supporting cast, but these guys do stand as pillars, and in my mind, rightfully so.
So I think that before recently, I would have trended more towards the more general theory of like, yeah, like there are people that can at times like kind of dominate the mindset of everyone, and like they can take on the limelight, and they can be thrust into the public sphere as like the champions of a cause or a movement or a technology or something like that. But at the end of the day, it's not really a single person. It's always just like this combination of factors. I think that up until more recently, I would have more or less agreed with that. Like obviously, that like I'm really big on like reading biographies, and I love that type of shit. I love like learning about historical figures and like how they were, the way that they acted, like the things that they did, the choices they made. And I would say like the one that has impacted me the most in terms of like changing the way that I view this like great man theory is Churchill, actually. So that, more than anything, more than like, an Einstein or a Newton or even like an MLK, right? Mm-hmm. Because in parallel with all of those figures, you had people that were working on the same problem and getting close to that solution, right? Correct. Like Newton barely beat Leibniz to calculus. Einstein barely beat fucking whoever. God damn it, I'm going to lose my mind. There's another physicist that was very close to the same general theory of relativity as, or I guess, yeah, the specific theory of relativity first. But then also like, Watson and Crick with DNA, like there were other competing teams that are very close to discovering DNA. With MLK, like you had a whole movement, mm-hmm. right? He wasn't the only figure. If MLK wasn't around, the movement still would have gotten there eventually. It might have just taken a little bit more time. So in a lot of cases, like the counterfactual isn't that this thing never happens. It's just that it takes a little bit more time. Right. With Churchill, that's the scenario where I firmly believe now that like if Churchill would not have existed, the history of the world would be different. Like if there was one person that truly prevented like Nazis from taking over Europe and potentially taking over everything else, it was Churchill. Or not even Nazis, but like Nazis, and then also like communists in Asia and how that would have potentially spread to Africa and eventually maybe even to like the Americas. But dude, if you want to have your fucking mind blown about someone's ability to impact history,
Yeah.
Churchill. It is like truly, if this dude would not have existed, Europe would be currently a Nazi continent, like straight up. It would just be all fascist. So like that to me is one where I'm like that. It really changed the way that I view this idea of like one person being able to truly and independently alter the course of history. We've seen how that can happen negatively, right?
Right.
So like an indecision or a bad decision could alter the fate of history, right? Like if there were a few people who would have gone through with launching nuclear weapons whenever there were, tests or poor radar signaling or something like that from like the Cold War, then yeah, like that's a single person having an outsized impact on the future of the world and humanity. But whenever it comes to like great men having positive impacts, I think that's more challenging because disasters are easy. Like disasters can happen relatively simply. It's just incompetence and idiocy and all that shit. But like for someone like Churchill to like alter the course of history in a positive direction, like a lot of things have to coalesce and happen all at once. But yeah, dude, like you like read if you haven't read like a Churchill biography or something like that, you need to read one.
Does Isaacson have one?
So Andrew Roberts. So he's the same author as the Napoleon bio. Phenomenal. But for real, like that will it's not like tech focused, obviously, but just in terms of like changing the way that you view how one person can impact literally everything. That's one where I'm like, fucking hell, man. Like it's crazy to think about like what would have been if it was not for like one person just being like so fucking stubborn and steadfast that it's beyond even comprehension.
Yeah, I will. So I generally, obviously, this, I enjoy history. Biographies I haven't read a decent biography that was non-tech or sport focused since Lincoln. And when you mentioned Churchill, I was like, okay, I could, because I'm like, okay, I think Emancipation Proclamation, I think North losing Civil War, and how that changes the landscape of things. Now, obviously, Lincoln wasn't the only one pushing the Emancipation Proclamation, and he had a supporting party and so on and so forth. However, there is that, like, he had dissent in his own party as well. Like, I don't think this is necessarily a great idea. Like, I think this, and he had to essentially push the button, on this is what we're going to do. Yeah. And signing that did change the course of history because there is a heavy cascading of things that now are flip-flop. Should that not happen? But taking that to a degree of what I understand and thinking about what you're talking about, that is cool. I mean, when you have those people who, the moment, right? Like I think sports all the time. So I think Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, the shot, LeBron, the block. It's like, could another person in that, like, could they do it, right? Could they have that single-handed impact on that moment? And you take it obviously grand scale and talk about the world and its history, and it gets mind-blowing. So I'll definitely check it out. But yeah, I don't know. It's we tangented off. So yeah. Thanks for everyone who did hang out. We want to know what you guys think though about social media. Like obviously the good, the bad, the ugly. What you guys think about the bill that was passed. Any questions, comments, concerns, information, continuing to enlighten us. Drop it in the comment section and share and like, and we'll hit you up.